It was another season of Max Verstappen dominance, and like many a Grand Prix this past season, there is little doubt as to who finishes ahead in our countdown of the top 10 F1 drivers of 2023. Behind the record-breaking Red Bull star, however, the battle is on for the remaining positions. What a cameo! It may only have been 5 races, but Lawson, only the second New Zealander in F1 for almost 40 years, did enough to suggest he will be handed a permanent race seat in 2025. Lawson even had hard-to-please Red Bull advisor Helmut Marko, likening him to New Zealand hero Bruce McLaren, describing the 21-year-old as tough but a very smart man in a fight. Replacing Daniel Ricciardo at AlphaTauri after the Australian broke a bone in his left hand during a crash in practice for the Dutch Grand Prix, Lawson endured a baptism of fire given the rainy conditions that dominated over the Zandvoort weekend. But he brought the car home in a creditable 13th, improving to 11th at Monza, before scoring a superb 9th and 2 crucial points in the Singapore Grand Prix, in which he also outqualified Red Bull's Max Verstappen by 0.007 seconds. Russell slated the season as the worst of his career. He is perhaps being harsh on himself, but in finishing 8th in the drivers' standings, 59 points behind Mercedes teammate Lewis Hamilton, it is easy to understand the Briton's perspective. On reflection, though, Russell and Hamilton were equal in the qualifying head-to-head, with 11 apiece, so it is clear he managed to extract performance over one lap from a car that became difficult to handle at times. But Russell only has himself to blame for making several uncharacteristic errors. Singapore was a low point when he crashed out late on, whilst on course for a podium and pushing for the win. That cost him a healthy number of points that arguably could have seen him finish 4th, behind Hamilton. Russell's season at least finished on a high with 3rd in Abu Dhabi, only his second top 3 finish of the year, but a case of too little too late, underlining why he only just scrapes into this top 10. A superb rookie season for Piastri, who underlined why McLaren went through a contract recognition board hearing in the summer of last year to secure the services of a driver previously on the books at Alpine. Piastri had to patiently wait until the 10th race of the season and the British Grand Prix before finally proving why he was so sought after. As with long overdue upgrades on his MCL60, he qualified 3rd and finished 4th, scoring more points in that one race than he had done in the previous 9. After clinching his first podium in Japan where he was 3rd, Piastri dazzled under the lights in Qatar, claiming the sprint victory from pole position, becoming one of only 2 drivers to win a race other than Red Bull, and he was 2nd in the Grand Prix. By his own admission, race and tyre management let him down on occasion, but his maturity, calmness, his ability to learn quickly, and his all-around speed hugely impressed all inside McLaren, marking him out as a potential champion of the future. You may perhaps think this is harsh on Sainz, given he was the only non-Red Bull driver to win a Grand Prix, and he finished in the top 10 in 18 of the 22 races, yet the majority of his season was relatively mediocre, spiced with the odd outstanding drive. Sainz was outqualified 15-7 by teammate Charles Leclerc and scored only 3 podiums to the Monegasque's 6, even if one of those was a win in Singapore, where he delivered an outstanding defensive performance to hold off McLaren's Lando Norris to the checkered flag. The Spaniard had performed similar heroics 2 weeks previously in Monza, only for a mistake late on that demoted him to 3rd just ahead of Leclerc. Beyond those 2 drives, it is hard to recall a time when Sainz caught the eye. In comparison to Leclerc, Sainz's season petered out, arguably as a result of an upgrade on the SF23 in Japan that resulted in the car going away from him and more towards the other side of the garage. He was not helped by car issues that forced him out of the Qatar GP before the start, and which saw him knocked out in Q1 in Abu Dhabi before a late race retirement, albeit when he was running out of the points. The fact Leclerc finished level on points with Fernando Alonso in the drivers' standings, yet only lines up 6th on this list, epitomizes the turbulent nature of his season, which at times was excellent, others bitterly frustrating. Take the first 3 races of the season, for example, as a prime indicator of the latter. In Bahrain, Leclerc qualified third and was running third when he retired with an engine failure. As a consequence, after qualifying second at the next race in Saudi Arabia, the Monegasque served a 10-place grid penalty for exceeding the quota of control electronics units. In Australia, he was out on lap 1 after a collision with Aston Martin's Lance Stroll. For the rest of the season through to Japan, where the SF23 finally received an upgrade that played more to Leclerc's strengths, the roller-coaster nature of his campaign continued. Highs included third in Azerbaijan and Belgium, and runner-up in Austria. But they were spliced with lows, such as exiting in Q1 for the first time in 3 years at the Spanish GP, and finishing a lowly 9th at Silverstone after starting 4th. Even after Japan, there was a disqualification in Austin for excessive skid block wear, and a failure to start in Brazil, where the car spun him into a barrier, with a hydraulics failure on a lap to the grid. Yet he was third in Mexico, and runner-up in Las Vegas, and Abu Dhabi, to conclude a campaign that also saw him start from pole on 5 occasions, but failed to convert any into a win. This will not be a surprising choice due to sheer consistency across the course of the season, particularly in a Williams that was never upgraded after the August summer break. Then Albon hit the mark, both in qualifying and Grands Prix where others failed. Remember, this is about the driver, not the car, and for Albon to score all but one of Williams' 28 points across the season cannot be understated. His contribution allowed the team to clinch 7th in the Constructors' Championship, its highest position for 6 years after finishing last in 4 of the previous 5. Albon often hauled the car into the top 10 in qualifying, notably a 3-race run in Canada, Austria and Britain, where he finished 7th and 8th in Montreal and Silverstone, as the car's straight-line speed proved formidable. Remarkably, despite the stop on development, Albon scored more points after the summer break than before, with his racecraft and positioning sense often keeping him ahead of quicker cars. He also finished the season as the only driver to out-qualify his teammate, in this case Logan Sargent, in all 22 races. It was not vintage Hamilton, far from it, with the 7-time F1 champion ending a second successive season without a win to his name. Yet he still managed to clinch a comfortable third in the drivers' standings. Lewis Hamilton's performances were subject to the vagaries of a car in which he all too often lacked confidence, primarily due to the rear being unstable given the forward positioning of the cockpit compared to the cars of his rivals, notably Red Bull. There were still 6 podiums, including 3 as runner-up, and 20 top 10 finishes overall, marred only by his first corner collision with teammate George Russell in Qatar, followed by his disqualification from the United States Grand Prix after finishing second. After taking a legitimate second in Mexico, there was a subdued conclusion to the season across the final 3 races, but there's enough to suggest throughout the year overall that if given the right car next season, he will be a more consistent challenger. You have to brush aside the first 8 races of the season when McLaren deployed a MCL 60 behind in development over the winter. It meant the team's real challenger did not materialize until the Austrian Grand Prix with a powerful upgrade. Taken in isolation from that race on, if the championship had been held over the final 14 Grands Prix, then Norris would have finished second to Verstappen in the drivers' standings. Such were his performances in a revitalized car that received further updates ahead of the Singapore GP. Throughout that period, the only blots on his copybook were a number of his qualifying performances. Norris notably made mistakes in Qatar and Austin, especially when he should have clinched pole, as well as in the final race in Abu Dhabi, after which he pointedly stated he had done a shit job on Saturdays. There were, however, 6 creditable runner-up finishes in Grand Prix behind Verstappen, and a stunning performance in Mexico, where the Briton finished 5th after starting from 17th. The old master was back, delivering a display over the year that showcased his talents and belied his 42 years, certainly at the start of the campaign when Aston Martin surprised everyone by delivering a car second only to Red Bull. Alonso scored 6 podiums in the first 8 Grand Prix when the AMR23 was its most competitive. But for a poor pit wall decision over tyre choice in mixed conditions during the Monaco Grand Prix, Alonso might just have had a 33rd career victory, with the long wait now stretching to a decade. Even through Aston Martin's mid to late season slump, Alonso still dragged the car into the points, notably finishing runner-up for the 3rd time in the year in the rain-hit Dutch Grand Prix before a welcome 3rd in Brazil. Those results came after a disastrous showing from the team in the preceding 2 races in Austin and Mexico City, with the 2-time F1 champion retiring in both. Alonso finished 4th in the drivers' standings, describing the season as the best in his career alongside 2012, whilst with Ferrari, when he missed out on a 3rd title by 3 points to Red Bull's Sebastian Vettel. Given Alonso's memory for detail, who are we to argue? No argument again. Yes, Alonso turned back the clock, but you cannot dismiss the achievements of Verstappen, who rewrote F1's record books with a sublime season that will be incredibly difficult to match, never mind beat for as long as the sport exists. The 26-year-old set new benchmarks with the number of races won in a season, 19, wins to races percentage, 86.36%, beating Alberto Ascari's 71-year mark, consecutive number of wins, 10, and most laps led, 1,003. Of course, the obvious argument is that Verstappen had the best car, and the RB19 will go down as one of the best, if not the best, in F1 history, but set against the benchmark of teammate Sergio Perez, the Dutch driver eclipsed the Mexican in every facet. Even when Perez had the upper hand in the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, winning the sprint and race to suggest he would be a challenger to Verstappen, the latter switched to another level as he learned all he could about his car in different settings and modes whilst lagging behind in Baku, and never looked back from the next race in Miami, where he beat pole-sitter Perez from 9th on the grid. It will be next to impossible to replicate this season's performance again by anyone.